My name is Lee Dixon.
And I'm Mary Dixon.
And we have been attending a Celebration Church for many years, well before since we got married, about a little over 12 years.
In October of 2017, we were so excited to find out that we were expecting our first child. When we went for our first ultrasound, it was a few days before Christmas that year. The doctor came in and told us that our baby had an irregular heart rhythm and also a marker of a possible chromosomal abnormality. So they drew blood that day for possible chromosomal abnormalities. And they basically told us that something was very wrong. And we had to wait several days until we got the results of that test back. Thankfully, the test came back normal, and we found out that we were having a baby boy through that test. So we named him Emmett Lee Dixon. And we were hopeful at this point that things would turn around and get better. We had lots of people already praying for us at that point and praying for our child and hoping that things would get better. So when we went to the high risk, we found out that not only was there an irregular rhythm in Emmett's heart, he also had a very dangerously low heart rate. They looked closer at his heart and they found that there were several major heart defects that they felt would not allow him to survive to birth. So they told us that it was very likely at any point very soon that his heart would just stop beating. So again, this was devastating news to us. We prayed for a miracle. We had lots of people around that were praying for a miracle as well for our child. We had hours turn into days, days turn into weeks. His heart continued to beat. And so as the time went on, we remained hopeful. We hoped that there could be something that could save our child, or a miracle, or some sort of intervention that could be done to help him.
Around 19 weeks, we asked our high-risk doctor if we could be referred to Nashville, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt. When we went there, they pretty much confirmed what we had already heard from our high-risk doctors and from our regular obstetrician, and they kind of agreed with the high-risk doctors, saying that it was not likely that he would have survived over the coming weeks. But time continued on, week after week. He still stayed with the low heart rate, but still just kind of pushing on. And it was around that time, not long after that, that he started to show signs of heart failure through fluid that was collecting in his body and in his heart. And it was also at that time that we started to notice that not long after that, that Mary started to reflect the same symptoms. She started to develop fluid as well, something that they call mirror syndrome, which is very common for heart failure with babies of that nature. And we just kind of knew after several more weeks that something needed to be done. But around that time when she was admitted, after that, she was kept overnight in the hospital here in the area. And the next day we were sent home, and they just said to rest and things of that nature, and they put on what was called modified bed rest.
That night we found out that I was starting to have contractions, but decided to call the hospital and said just to see how I felt in the morning. So by the time morning came, the contractions were a lot worse. And I was in quite a bit of pain. So we called the hospital again. They told us to go on to Vanderbilt in the case that I were to have to deliver that day, that we would be where we needed to be in case they could do something to help and save Emmett.
We made it to Vanderbilt, fortunately, and while Mary was still having the severe contractions, we had made it in time. And when we got there, they told us that, confirmed that yes, she was in labor, it was progressing. And when we met with the doctors just before the delivery, they told us that there was no intervention that could be done that would be of any help without causing major pain. And even then, there was very little chance of a successful recovery. They told us that they were going to do essentially what was called comfort care, where they were just going to make him as comfortable as possible. Emmett was born at 8:58 p.m. on April 6th of 2018. He lived for about 2 hours after he was born. He didn't make a sound, but he did have a few little small movements. It was just very subtle, but we got to spend a couple of hours with him, and it was just getting to see him just in a general sense, just even with everything that he had been through, and just a little teeny tiny bit of activity we could get, while heartbreaking at the same time. It was just this bittersweet joy because we didn't think we would get to that point. The doctors told us from 12 weeks on that he's not going to make it another week, and twice that long after he finally arrived. And so just to see him, while it was this thing of just not being able to comprehend just how blessed we were to get to that point, but at the same time feeling just so heartbroken to know that we only got that time, a little bit of time with him. But it was just still such a blessing to get to see him for that, even that little bit of time.
So through this tragedy and through the heartache of it all, we had an indescribable peace. We were able to go through this day by day, and even when things felt hard and it felt like we couldn't face another day, the Lord helped us to do that. And so we know without a doubt that we had witnessed a miracle in Emmett's case. It wasn't exactly as we had envisioned, but we witnessed the miracle of seeing him born alive when no doctor ever predicted that he would be born alive and breathing. We got to see thousands of people following our story and coming together, praying for us. We were able to become closer as husband and wife, and closer to God than we had ever been before. And so we know that without a doubt, even though this was tragic and hard, that we had witnessed a miracle, that God was with us every step of the way, even through the times that we felt like we couldn't make it through.
While nothing could ever take the place of Emmett in our hearts, there's always going to be a hole there. After that, we still had the desire to see our family grow beyond just the two of us here and now. And so we found out that in November of 2019 that we were expecting again. And it was one of the most bizarre, for me, it was one of the most bizarre things to ever experience, because you feel overjoyed just being able to go through that journey again, but at the same time, with everything that had happened, it was just the scariest thing we'd ever experienced, just to see that confirmation on the pregnancy test. It was just like, it just didn't feel like it could be real. We didn't feel like we would ever be there again. From day one, it seemed like everything was going really well. All the appointments were normal, far beyond the point where we found out about the issues with Emmett in the pregnancy with him. When we got far along enough in this pregnancy to take the chromosome test, we found out that we were again having a boy, whom we decided to name Camden Lee Dixon.
On June 5th of 2020, Camden decided to arrive early. So he was 32 weeks and 5 days along, and I started having contractions. And so before delivery, obviously the concern was him being developed enough at birth, especially his lungs and things like that. So we prayed that he would be born healthy and not have struggles to breathe and things like that. When Camden was born, he was 5 pounds, so he was small, but we heard immediately a very loud cry. And so when we heard that sound, it was indescribable, the emotions that we felt, just knowing that he was alive. And he had a couple days on oxygen and then needed a little bit of time to learn to eat and to regulate his body temperature before he was able to come home.
After about an 18-day stay at the NICU, Camden got to come home, and we were we couldn't believe it, because the day that they came in, it was just that day, just out of nowhere, and we just couldn't believe that we were getting to make it home with a child that we never would have imagined a year or so before that we could have ever had in our lives. And it was just such a bittersweet experience. But we just to think on what we had been through, but to bring him home and to have this beautiful boy who just was a part of our lives that we didn't even realize that we were ever going to be able to experience. We weren't sure. We knew God was with us, and we knew that He's never left us, but we never knew what was going to happen after everything with him. And now Camden is 16 months old. He is into everything. He is the most adventurous, little rambunctious thing, and he just came along at a time when we needed him the most. With everything that we'd been through, and even with all the coming early and all the anxiety that came with that, and just the worry, but knowing that God was with us, it was a blessing beyond anything we'd ever experienced. And I know that God is watching us every single day and helping him grow, and we're praying every single day just to be able to love him and to raise him to love God just as we do, and for him to know just how special and how precious he is to us. And while we still maybe don't understand fully why we went through what we did, there's still days where we will look back and we'll talk to each other and we'll feel like it's hard, because you can't talk to Emmett, you can't know what he's going through, but knowing that he's in heaven and knowing that he's perfect and not suffering just makes it to where, and then having Camden, it just makes it to where, like we said before, just a peace that we know everything's okay, even in spite of the moments when we feel like we're down. He's always with us, and while we may feel like it, he's never forsaken us. He's not there just to tear us down. There's always something that comes from it.
And I think too, it's taught us not to take a single moment for granted. With Camden especially, and given our history, just making sure that we take the time to notice every little moment and to appreciate it even more.